do in the face of this climate emergency. They will invite you to join with them on the 10 action committees we are forming. Then we hope you will introduce yourselves to us. I'll begin by introducing myself. My name is Kathleen Sullivan, and I am what we are calling the acting lead of FCAN. You might call me the inaugural rabble rouser. Many of you know my husband, Bob Stevens, who has been active in many town committees over the years, or our daughter Bridget, or our son Colin. We've lived here in Freeport for 47 years.
I have two red-headed grandchildren in the schools here.
I've been a psychotherapist for over 50 years and a dabbler in the written word for the last 15. As a psychotherapist, I know a little about the tricks the mind plays to keep us from confronting fears and the uncertainty and helplessness that accompany these fears. 3 years ago, after attending a workshop in the community's room put on by Freeport Conservation Trust, I heard the words managed retreat for the first time. I looked at the maps the speaker projected onto the screen. I saw for the first time how sea level rise would inundate the salt marshes at Porter's Landing, where my children had learned about mud and red-winged blackbirds. The talk so startled me to the immediacy of the climate emergency that I did what I knew to do at the time. I edited a book of art and writing called A Dangerous New World, Maine Voices for the Climate Crisis. We had a big coming out party again in the community room at FCS. Some of you were a big part of that book. Margaret Morphet edited the art. Lee Chisholm has a piece of art in the book. Kate Olsen has an essay. Then the pandemic arrived. Readings were canceled. As I tried to make sense of this newly reordered pandemic world, my attention to climate activism languished until the morning at the end of last summer when I saw the sun rise scarlet over the ocean. Smoke from the wildfires out west had turned the sun this frightening color, like the pictures of the inundated salt marshes. It awakened again my realization that this emergency was not something in the far off distance, but had arrived as a ferocious red mark in the sky. If I wasn't going to fall into a great puddle of despair, or bury my head under the pillow, or start to drink, I needed to do what I tell my patients to do. Make a plan to change something. Talk about your concerns. Connect to other people. It started with conversations on my porch. Ed and Jane Bradley were the first people I spoke to. Ed thought it would be helpful to know what kinds of actions are most effective. He suggested a town forum on the topic and got the approval of the town council for such an event. Ta-da! I sat on more porches and at picnic tables and talked. It was as if people were waiting for this opportunity to not feel so alone with the worry for the planet and to join with neighbors to do something. We formed a steering committee. Colin designed a logo and a flyer. We invited more people to come talk about their concerns. They came. 4.5 months later, here we are. I've never felt so much enthusiasm and drive rise around a problem, so much hope and creative spirit. We at FCAN hope to pass this experience on to you tonight in hopes you will join in this rowdy spirit of love for this place we love. FCAN is now a 501c3. This is how we describe ourselves on the website. We've come together to support, educate, and empower each other to take action here at home to reduce the use of fossil fuels right now, before the window to protect our planet from devastating harm closes for centuries. We want to reassure you, any of you who worry that we are usurping the Sustainability Committee's work, that we are working hand in hand with them on the problem of the climate crisis. We are here to support their work, and they support ours. We have different governing structures that give each of us different missions. The Sustainability Committee is a town committee and as such advises the town council and is responsible to the town council. Committee members must be approved by the town council and meetings must be announced publicly before they are held. FCAN, by its structure, is freer to rabble rouse and scheme Now that you've met me and FCAN, it's time to meet Susanna Hancock, Anna Brown, and Mason Morphet, 3 people on our steering committee who are going to tell you about the current state of affairs regarding the health of the planet. Up first is the inimitable Susanna Hancock. Susanna is a multidisciplinary Arctic climate researcher with a PhD in this field. She has been an invited speaker at international TED events, UN climate conferences, and other global fora, where she regularly shares the dais. Where's that dais? Dais with world leaders. She's currently training for a 600-kilometer self-supporting polar expedition as part of an international climate project. And she's running the technology of this project right now. So here we are. Susanna.
All right, welcome. Thank you all for being here. Great to see all of you. And I'm going to, Kathleen said I'm running technology, so I now need to make sure it works. So I'm gonna give that a test go at the moment. Right. Going to share my screen. All right. So hopefully this is something that you're all seeing now. So as Kathleen mentioned, my name is Susanna. I grew up in Freeport. I attended the public schools here through age 13, and I'm an Arctic climate scientist. And I have worked on the intergovernmental panel or intergovernmental reports. And for those of you who may be familiar with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's report that came out last summer, aptly titled Code Red in many circles, I was one of the people working on that. So I've been enjoying quite a lot of the scary climate scene, and I've been back in town throughout the pandemic. So one thing I enjoy about the Arctic, or that makes it exciting, I guess, is that when we think about warming the planet, many of us think about those polar bears. And indeed, this is a region that is warming 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. So this means that as a scientist working there, constantly dealing with communities with high suicide rates, forced relocations, food chains that have become toxic. Last July, when West Coast wildfires were polluting our air here and our skies were turning red and black, Greenland lost 197 billion tons of ice. To put that in perspective, that is enough water to fill 80 million Olympic swimming pools. That is in 1 month. The vast majority of sea ice in the Arctic is now seasonal. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this 1.5 degrees that we want to keep warming in the world to. But that 1.5 degrees refers to maybe 8 or 9 degrees, and this is centigrade in this part of the world. So for a visual, this is a glacier that I worked on in Iceland when I was an undergraduate. And this is it long before I got there, back in 1999. This is that same glacier last year. This here is also another part of that glacier, 1999, last year. So you can see these changes are something that is happening and very visceral to this part of the world. For reference, this is Vatnajökull in Iceland. Right nearby, 2018, Iceland marked its first glacier that it attributed to the loss through anthropogenic, which is human-induced climate. And this is Ok. And they held a funeral for it. So internationally, we're working within what's known as the Paris era. So for those of you who are familiar with the Paris Accords, this is 2015, the International Governmental Panel on Climate Change, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and UN Conference on Climate Change came together in Paris and held a meeting to limit the planetary warming to 2 degrees, ideally 1.5 degrees. This is above pre-industrial levels, which approximately refers to the mid 1800s. So just to give you a visual of how much temperatures have been changing, there it goes. So this shows that, steadily each year, things are getting hotter. So while we've made some progress in the past couple of years with policy and lowering emissions levels, we're still on track to blow right past that 1.5 and likely that 2 degrees in the coming years. So the Paris Agreement, as I mentioned, is part of this process under the auspices of the UN Framework Convention of Climate Change, which began these meetings in 1994. And most recently was held in Glasgow last November. And I was there invited to speak with the UN and the World Meteorological Organization to wrap up that session as sort of a final thoughts. So I was in Glasgow and Geneva for a month. And although I would like to say I had higher hopes, I would largely say that this meeting met my expectations, which is to say that it failed pretty miserably. On the eve of the conference, it was hosted by the UK. The foreign minister of the UK was in the Gulf states reaffirming a petroleum deal so that Brexit is sort of a post-Brexit deal for oil. The fossil fuel industry, despite having been told that they would not be part of this conference, had more accredited delegates than any other country or sector there. They were inside the blue zone, which is the UN moderated political space, which means that they had unfettered access to politicians, global leaders, and decision makers around the world. And despite a UN pledge that came out of this conference to phase down coal, the UK leadership doubled down on its proposal for a new coal mine, saying that it needs this energy. And going back to this picture, that halfway through the conference on November 6th, we had a global day of action. More than 100,000 people came to Glasgow to protest in the streets. So this is just an image from that. And if you haven't heard any of the talks from this event, if you're interested in hearing some of them, several that I particularly enjoyed or sort of got that urgency across that really was missed by so many people. There was a trio from the small Pacific or small island states. Here in the center of the image, Simon Kofa, Tuvalu's foreign minister, who joined via press conference or video conference. And he was standing behind his lectern, thigh deep in water. Mia Mottley, who's the prime minister of Barbados, is the other one on the screen. And she stated the decisions of the global north are measured in the lives and livelihoods of those living on her frontline island. Echoing Mottley, Palauan President Sarangil Wits Jr. again likened the current inaction to basically being bombed. And I watched, despite these promises designed to equalize nations, that the political scaffolding fortifies the power of those who have it. So what is at stake? We talk about this 1.5, limiting 1 degree warming to 1.5. What does that matter? How is that half of a degree that matter? So 1.5 degrees, we're going to see that bleaching of the majority of coral reefs. 1 billion people exposed to severe heat waves every 5 years. Remember last summer's heat dome in the West, in which shellfish were practically boiled in the ocean. Imagine that as normal. 46 million people impacted by sea level rise, impacts on economic growth. At 2 degrees, we see 170% rise in global flood risk, virtually loss of all coral, 2.7 billion people exposed to those severe heat waves, 49 million now impacted by water rise, loss of marine life for fishing, agriculture, freshwater availability drops twice as fast. And at 3 degrees, which is towards our current trajectory, hundreds of millions of people are forced to relocate due to sea level rise. Heat waves become 41 times more likely. Habitat for all species, triple. Habitat loss, triple. And if the planet warms beyond more than 4.5 degrees, which was our pre-Paris trajectory, the majority of life on the planet would no longer be viable. Under all scenarios, those severe storms, those hurricanes, category 4, category 5, would become on an annual basis, very common. Last year alone in this country, we had $20 billion disasters linked to climate. So this is just to give you a little bit of our trajectory and where we're going. So we're still well past that 1.5, even with that trajectory. So just quickly, just running through what Maine looks like. This shows you our current trends. And this shows that this is true in Maine here as well. You can see those temperatures rising. This is just the annual year. The big point for Maine is that if any of you like skiing, Baltimore may not be your hotspot for skiing, but Portland is going to have that climate of Baltimore by the end of the century. So the maple syrup, the lobsters, the apple trees, everything that you totally don't associate with Baltimore is what we're looking at. And this is just a picture of Portland. This was a couple years ago, but this is Algonquin on Monday, Kennebunk on Monday, Freeport on Monday, Rockland, Winslow Park. This is what it looks like now. At an astronomical high tide, this is Winslow Park. But with that sea level rise, at a minimum, this is what Winslow Park is going to be. And at a maximum of what we're actually looking at, but this is sort of what Winslow Park is on Monday. This is what it achieved. And what we're actually looking at by the end of the century is that. So you can see that it's going to be a bit of an island. And I will hand it off now. I'm going to hand it over back to Kathleen.
All right, thank you, Susanna. And now it's Anna Brown's turn to follow Susanna. Anna's the founder and principal. Oh, let me just turn my volume up here and make sure you can hear me. There we go. Anna is the founder and principal of Akita Consulting Company. She's an interdisciplinary thinker and practitioner with 20 years of experience working at the intersections of human and environmental systems. Anna earned an undergraduate degree in environmental studies from Brown and a master's in city planning from MIT. Anna.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. Can you all hear me okay and see my screen? Hoping that is the case. Excellent. Well, thanks so much, and Susanna, thanks for that that kickoff. Super helpful framing. For those of you who I don't know, I'm Anna, as Kathleen mentioned. I also grew up in Freeport and went through the public schools here through high school. And in one way or another, I have been working on climate change personally and professionally for pretty much my whole life, actually. I'm also a mom. I have 2 kids that are pretty young, and in 8 years' time, which is the time frame that is critical to how stable the climate will be for centuries to come. My kids will be in middle school and in high school. Neither of them will be able to vote, however. So just a couple of years ago, people used to talk about climate change in the future tense. It's, I think, pretty fair to say that it's unabashedly here now. And these are just some scenes. There are lots to choose from. We could have done a whole presentation on scenes from 2021 alone. But the one up at the top left might be recognizable to you. This is actually Portland, right near Whole Foods. And this was a flood event from 2015. This is the Bayside neighborhood. So Susanna's given us a good picture of the potential impacts of what 4 degrees might look like, 3 degrees, 1.5 and 2 degrees. it's really important that we think about and remember, though, that the world as we know it is built on a stable climate. All of our financial and our economic models that are deployed in everyday life, these are all based on assumptions of a stable climate. We're rapidly moving right now, though, toward instability. In physical terms, absolutely, but that also has implications in terms of financial, economic, political, social, all of those consequences. When banks stop lending for 30-year mortgages, that's going to precipitate a huge shift. And insurance products are annual products. And we're already hearing about, even this month, examples of folks' home insurance policies getting canceled because of a changing understanding of climate risk. This is happening a fair bit in California right now in zones that where people have been living in fire zones. But this is all taking place, and we're still in the green. We're at 1.2 degrees of warming. Climate action is needed in two broad buckets. There's mitigation and decarbonization, which is focused on cutting emissions, and then adaptation and resilience, which is focused on coping with the impacts that do play out. Historically, these two sides of climate action have been treated fairly separately. And in fact, even when I started working on adaptation professionally about 15 years ago, adaptation was sort of seen as a dirty word within the environmental community because there's a sense that we were throwing up our hands on mitigation. But I think now we're in a different era, and we're in an era where there's a much stronger recognition that we need to both mitigate and adapt to climate change. So both of those are essential. The Earth is a massive system. So as we take actions now, those implications don't play out immediately. That's inertia. We have a huge amount of inertia in our system. So even if we were to cut emissions fully today, we know, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in their recent report underscored that no matter what, even if we cut emissions today, we're going to see 2 to 3 decades of warming, no matter what. Climate change affects everything. And interestingly, the Department of Defense has understood this for a while now. Actually, back in 2014, they started to frame climate change as a threat multiplier. And that is because all of the existing vulnerabilities in our systems, poverty, economic inequality, ecological destruction, underinvestment in infrastructure, droughts, floods, political and geopolitical tensions, all of this will be exacerbated by climate change. Like climate, COVID has also layered on top of a number of existing challenges. And it has laid bare the fragilities and inequities in our system. It's also exacerbated these. And the data on the left show how COVID has led to higher rates of infection and hospitalization and death for non-white folks. And then we also are, we're still in this pandemic, but climate change, as this Economist cartoon depicts, is looming with us and still playing out. So I've talked about climate mitigation and adaptation as two sides of climate action, and I want to introduce a third and crucial element, and that is equity. Like climate and like COVID, climate change and this climate emergency doesn't affect everybody the same. Not everybody already is being affected, and in the future, these implications will play out more. And this is really critical to understand as we think ahead about what are we going to do to address this problem. Climate change is fundamentally unfair. The countries and the people that have done the least to cause the problem are facing the gravest consequences. There are studies that show that the top 10% in terms of wealth have generated 50% or more of global emissions. And 10% of wealth is defined as net income over $38,000 annually, and that's in 2011 purchasing power parity terms. The resources that are available to cope are also not evenly distributed. Things like race, income, education levels, age, physical ability, gender, all of these factors are important in terms of affecting and influencing an individual or community's capacity to cope. So the impacts of climate change also compound as stress and shocks pile on. Some of these changes are abrupt, like a storm, and we are seeing nationally that the costs of extreme weather events are going up each year. But there's also gradual shifts, drought, for example, and also shifts in Maine fisheries. Freeport has a history of an active working waterfront, but the fisheries in Maine are taking quite a hit from climate change. This, of course, has implications for people's lives and livelihoods and also just family traditions. There's other factors, too, that are not related to climate change that also add strain, like housing instability and financial pressures. Studies show that housing is the primary determinant of people's financial security and generational wealth. Freeport has a major shortage of affordable housing units. It also lacks diversity in housing options. In general, diversity in housing stock is an indicator of a healthy community because it allows people to age in place or allows for the next generation to stay or to come back. And it also allows family to weather unexpected financial crises that may emerge. So if we think about an underserved family living on the financial margins, what one flood event or one intense windstorm might do if it knocks a tree down onto a car or a trailer, that can have a massive downward spiraling consequences. And that's what this graphic on the left depicts. And that's why measures that reduce vulnerability and risk, ensure adequate affordable housing, provide safety nets, and allow for quicker ways to recover. These are all ways to help strengthen climate resilience. So Freeport is looking ahead at actions that we can take to decarbonize and to strengthen the resilience of our community. As we do this, though, it's important that we remember that our past decisions have gotten us to where we are. And I'm not only talking about ecological collapse and the climate crisis, though that is something we could have another whole evening on for sure, but I'm specifically referring to structural exclusion. And just an example of this is with the practice of redlining. Redlining started in the 1930s and formally ended in 1968 with the Fair Housing Act and then later the Community Reinvestment Act. Backed by the federal government, local real estate agents were hired to go around to cities across the country and make appraisals. And they used that information to generate color-coded maps. So neighborhoods that had a heavy immigrant population or many Black families, or in some cases, maybe just a single Black family, these neighborhoods were deemed as risky and hazardous. And so consequently, the people living in these areas were not able to get a loan. They couldn't even refinance. So this, of course, you can imagine all of the kinds of knock-on impacts that would have and underinvestment. Not surprisingly, these same formerly redlined neighborhoods are generally more segregated. They have lower median household income and also lower home values. And in some cases, lower life expectancy of residents living there. In addition, these same areas now face higher climate risks, especially to flooding and to extreme heat. If you remember that image I showed you at the beginning of Portland, the flooding event in Portland, that's Bayside neighborhood. Bayside was a redline neighborhood in the 1930s. Today, Bayside has only 3% tree canopy, 75% of the residents live in poverty, and 54% of the people living in Bayside are not white. Going back even further in US history, when Europeans started to arrive in what is now the United States, These new arrivals, and then later the United States government, pushed tribes, the first people on these lands, onto marginal lands. These were often marshlands or floodplains. And there's researchers that have actually quantified and found that tribes in the present day US lost 99% of their land. And studies also are showing and measuring the fact that past forced relocation of indigenous peoples has increased climate vulnerability. And furthermore, many of the indigenous peoples today live in areas that are going to become uninhabitable due to climate change. So as any political scientist will tell you, how you frame a problem dictates what solutions become available. Climate change is fundamentally a fairness and an equity challenge. The impacts are uneven, and these dynamics play out globally, but they also play out locally as well. The health and the resilience of our community depends on the well-being of all, and that's future and current residents. Researchers have found that communities that are more connected are more resilient. When we know and we're able to, and we do help our neighbors, even across difference, we're all stronger. And studies of resilience also highlight how diversity is a fundamental characteristic. The presence of a variety of landscapes, of knowledge, of institutions, of people and different cultural groups, all of this provides strength and different options to respond to uncertainty and change and surprises. And I think if there's one thing we've learned from the last couple of years is that surprises do happen. And we can imagine, I think, from what we've heard from Susanna and hopefully from this, that climate change is going to bring a lot more surprises. So as we look ahead toward action, we need to actively confront some of the underlying structural issues that have brought us into this climate emergency and have created systems of exclusion. Equity needs to be a core consideration. And then finally, it's really important to remember that so many folks don't have a say or very limited say in what the future brings, in particular future generations. And so as we move ahead and start thinking about action, it'll be really important to bear this in mind as well. Thank you so much. I guess I'll hand it back to you, Kathleen. Is that right?
Thank you, Anna. All right, next in line is Mason Morphet. Mason describes himself as a retiree who spent the last 33 years of his professional life working for the Nature Conservancy. Well, he did more than that. He was the statewide director of the Nature Conservancy. And he won't tell you this, but his knowledge of the workings of state and local government and related agencies is quite prodigious. So everybody's telling me I have to talk up again. People usually tell me to be quiet, but somehow my microphone must not be picking this up. But Mason, you're on.
Thank you, Kathleen. I don't see myself yet, so I'll wait until we switch over.
Mason.
I hear somebody.
Mason, you have to go off. You have to put your video on yourself.
I don't seem to be able to.
You are live. I'm sharing your screen anyway, so it's okay.
Mason, just click the start video button if you can.
It says that the host has stopped the video. Nothing I can do at my end.
I have two people here working very hard.
There we go. I know we're running late on time and my video isn't that exciting. So I'll just start talking and
You're good to go. I've asked you to start it, but you need to start it. You can just talk because I'm sharing a screen for you.
Okay, there we go. So anyway, Our experience of climate change will be determined largely by the actions and the inactions of government. Here's a quick synopsis of where we are now. At the international level, the global response to climate change has been focused on the recent COP26 meetings in Glasgow, where our own steering committee member, Susanna Hancock, served as an expert reviewer. The general consensus is that COP26 was a significant disappointment, due in large part to the fact that the United States couldn't deliver legally binding commitments to lower its own greenhouse gas emissions to 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels, thereby losing a chance to exert international leadership. We need to write our congressional delegation, and often. At the national level, there are a multiplicity of federal laws and regulations designed to limit greenhouse gas emissions, but they're collectively inadequate to get the job done. Recent federal legislation, including the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, authorized billions of dollars, a fraction of which has found its way to Freeport. The Build Back Better Act, which contains the majority of the administration's climate change proposals, $555 billion worth, may or may not provide billions more. We need to make sure that Freeport has sufficient staffing to identify and apply for these funds when and if they become available. As of this moment, Freeport has about $750,000 in as yet unallocated ARPA funds. Town council will be deciding in the next few months how to spend those funds, and we need to be part of this process. At a regional level, Maine is one of 11 New England and Mid-Atlantic states participating in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI. Under RGGI, the state set an enforceable regional limit on the amount of carbon pollution that power plants are allowed to emit, and then sell pollution permits up to this limit through quarterly auctions. This program is of direct benefit to Freeport because RGGI auction revenues are a major source of funding for the state's Efficiency Maine program, which provides financial rebates for such things as electric vehicles, high efficiency household appliances, heat pumps, home insulation, etc. In fiscal year 2019, Efficiency Maine spent almost $10 million in RGGI proceeds on rebates. RGGI is in the middle of an internal review and may change some aspects of the program, notably setting a limit of 0 emissions beginning in 2030. That's the good news. The no free lunch aspect of this is that zeroing out emissions would eliminate auction proceeds allocated to Efficiency Maine, reducing its budgets for rebates by about 20%. If you have a friend in the POC, get in touch with them. At the state level, the Mills administration in 2020 launched Maine Won't Wait, a comprehensive climate action plan that's intended, among other things, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 45% by 2030, 80% by 2050, and to make Maine carbon neutral by 2050. It was developed by and is overseen by the Maine Climate Council, an assembly of 39 community leaders, which includes Dan Claben, the owner of Maine Beer in Freeport. We Won't Wait includes a Community Resilience Partnership, or CAP, which provides funding known as community action grants to local communities to pursue projects that are consistent with its various objectives. Unfortunately, the town of Freeport wasn't able to qualify for the first round of CAP grants because it hasn't yet met the application criteria, which requires a municipal resolution designating a municipal employee to coordinate the program, 2, completion of a community resilience self-evaluation to identify potential next steps, and 3, a public workshop to review and prioritize projects for implementation. Hopefully, Freeport will have qualified by the next round of grants next fall. The state of Maine is likely to be an important and ongoing source of technical assistance, funding, and regulation with respect to climate change. It's therefore important that we stay in close touch with the legislature and the various state agencies. Fortunately, our steering committee includes Freeport resident Beth Ahern, Director of Government Affairs for Maine Conservation Voters, who is in Augusta on a regular basis, and has proved herself to be a very effective advocate for the environment over several years. We're also fortunate that our state representative, Melanie Sachs, and our state senator, Maddie Daughtry, have lifetime NCV ratings of 100% and 93% respectively. Both are highly supportive of climate change legislation. In the town of Freeport, at the municipal level, is where we're most likely to devote most of our energy and action, as many aspects of life in Freeport are primarily the responsibility of municipal government, e.g. planning, zoning, building codes, etc. And many or most state initiatives are ultimately delegated to town government. Currently, the town of Freeport is engaged in several planning exercises that will have a direct impact on climate change, including a new 10-year comprehensive plan, a downtown vision plan, and potentially a climate action plan. Please note that the downtown vision plan will be conducting an online design week, February 3 through 7, and that a section specifically on the environment is scheduled for Friday the 4th. We need volunteers to participate in all of these planning exercises to make sure that climate change considerations are prominent throughout the final products. The town is currently in negotiations with the Greater Portland Council of Governments for consulting assistance in inventorying greenhouse gas emissions by source, assessing climate vulnerabilities, and developing a prioritized list of potential climate actions after a community-wide listening session. The GPCOG study will probably commence in February. Freeport CAN recently partnered with Freeport's Sustainability Advisory Board, which allocated $3,500 from its own budget in persuading the town council to allocate $6,500 from the current town budget to begin the GPCOG study. In addition, we got what we believe is a commitment from the council to hire a climate action coordinator in the planning department out of next year's budget beginning in July. We look forward to continuing to partner with and supplement the work of the SAB, which has only 7 members to deal with the full array of climate changes facing Freeport. Fortunately, one of our steering committee members, Susanna Hancock, is a member of the SAB, so we've got good communications there. To date, as described above, Freeport CAN has advocated successfully for the hiring of GPCOG and for the hiring of a climate action coordinator. We've also testified in town council about the impacts of COP26 and the paucity of electric vehicle charging stations in Freeport's largest parking lots. At its bi-monthly meetings, the council provides for a period of public comment. We hope to encourage regular testimony by many of you to make the council aware of the depth of support for climate change action on the part of citizens of Freeport. Bottom line is this: Freeport is significantly behind many other Maine towns which have already developed climate change action plans and or hired climate change coordinators. We urgently need to get up to speed. Finally, we also hope to inspire climate-related citizen action that's related to but independent of Freeport CAN. For example, last November, there was a special election to fill a vacancy on town council. Fellow steering committee Bob Stevens and I determined that one candidate, Matt Pillsbury, was much more concerned about climate change than his opponent. So we sent a letter endorsing his candidacy to every registered voter in District 3. New slide, please, Susanna, if possible. Matt won 613 to 305. Several people subsequently contacted me saying that our letter had had a decisive influence on their vote. I don't know how much credit Bob and I can take for Matt's victory, but we had a lot of fun engaging in grassroots politics. We'd encourage others to give it a try, either as campaign workers or as candidates. So there's a huge amount of work to be done at the municipal level. We hope you respond to our call for, quote, all hands on deck. Now to my friend Kate Olson.
Actually, before Kate goes, I'm going to just take a second here. And what I'd like to do before Kate goes is just take a second and talk to all of you out there and ask you for a minute just to sort of think about what it has felt like in the last 45 minutes to hear, particularly to hear all of this information about, you know, how how bad things are and what that feels like in your body right now as you listen to all of that. And I imagine it feels pretty heavy. It's hard and it feels awfully big. If it weren't so hard to confront, we would have solved this problem when we first learned about it in the late 80s. But the mind wants to run or minimize the problem or fall into magical thinking about the fact that maybe a big vacuum in the sky is going to come and save us, or think about ice cream sundaes, anything but this. I have my own confession to make about what we've just been doing, and that is that when these speakers wanted to, Kate and Anna and Mason wanted to talk about how bad things were, what I really wanted to do, was trying to do, is to say, oh no, you got to shorten that up because we've really just got to talk about action. Because I really didn't, I sort of took a look at my own mind, that it wanted to run too, wanted to take a run, and it didn't want to look at this information again. But I think it's really important for us to look again at really what we're facing. But now I have the antidote to the bad, heavy feelings that I assume many of you are feeling right now. And that antidote is action, and the kind of collective local action that we're going to introduce you to later, and that Kate has a lot to tell us about right now. So now I will introduce Kate Olsen, who is an award-winning writer, sociologist, and teacher. She holds an MA in environmental policy and a PhD in environmental sociology, and she is going to take us up and over to hope.
Thank you, Kathleen. Can everyone hear me and see my slides?
Yes.
Put it in, oh yeah, put
Okay.
Put it in presentation mode. We can see the notes. Oh, we see all the notes and stuff.
You see the notes? Okay, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Okay, give me a second here. Stop share. Okay. Share screen. Share. View. Presenter view. Was that?
Same.
Same? Okay.
Yeah.
1 second. Let's see. Stop share. Okay, how about almost there? Testing patience. How's that?
Brilliant.
All right.
Perfect.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here tonight. My name is Kate, and I'm an environmental social scientist. So I study the ways that human and natural systems interact. I'm also a mom of 2 small kids who will be in their 30s, about my age, in 2050, the year when the world will either have decarbonized or not. And that's up to us. So, how's everyone doing? Here's what we know. We know that climate change is scary. And we know it's not fair. And we know that it's really hard. It gives me a headache just thinking about it. It's really hard to sit with the reality of this. Even the folks over at Star Trek are having a hard time. So let's take a deep breath. And let's talk about fixing it. So how do we fix it? When we hear about how to take action on climate change, we often hear about 2 ways. Individual change, which is actions you take yourself in your own life, and systemic change or large scale changes. Individual changes do have an impact. Things like recycling, eating less meat, flying less, they do matter. They do save energy and resources. Their impact adds up. They can inspire other people to do similar things and send signals to businesses that folks are interested in green choices. This graph here helps us see the relative impact of some of the individual choices that we make. So you can see, for example, that avoiding 1 flight a year has a much larger impact than worrying about changing out all of your light bulbs, for example. But individual changes are unfortunately not enough, especially not now when we need to act really quickly, like when we need to decarbonize all human activity in the next 30 years, for example. And that's because our individual choices are shaped by the fossil fuel dependent pathways that we live within. If I want to stop flying due to emissions, but I have family on the West Coast or friends in the Midwest, my choices are not that great right now for how to visit them. If there's no sidewalk between my house and the school, I'm not going to let my kids bike there. I'll drive. If the bus between Freeport and Portland ran every 15 minutes, I might be able to take it more often. So our individual choices are shaped by factors that are often beyond our control. Okay, so what do? Individual choices are not enough. Systemic change is really hard. What do? You don't have to be a sad fuck, I promise. We have options. First, let's try to resolve these two extremes, these two poles, individual behavior change on the one hand and collective or systemic change on the other hand, by focusing on all of the spaces in between. What's in between the individual and the collective, or the systemic and social? The community, the neighborhood, the workplace. There are a lot of spaces we can influence and shift between individual and system. There are so many spheres that we each move in: our family, our neighborhood, our friends and social networks, our work or professional communities, and what we're talking about here tonight, our community. What if we were to bring our concern for the climate crisis to all of these spheres? Our individual power is connected to the power of our networks, not our social networks online, where information spreads really quickly, but influence does not. I mean our networks in the places where we live, where we are accountable to each other, where we see each other in the grocery store or walking on the street, where we have multiple friends and acquaintances in common. This is where cooperation can lead to trust and to meaningful change and resilience. And Anna talked before about how resilient communities are those that have a lot of social connections, and you can see that here in the graphic on the left. The biggest thing that influences social change, when we use our strong social ties to advocate for action. So how does social change happen? One thing we know is critical for all major social change is the shifting of social norms. What the people around you are doing, what the people around you value, what they're talking about. And when 25% of a population embraces an idea, change cascades. Change is gradual until suddenly it's not. When we start making changes, and importantly, asking those around us in our communities, in our jobs, in our families to make changes, we basically give the system a little kick or a little nudge. Our actions and conversations influence other people's actions and conversations, and those influence other people's. And suddenly change that felt impossible is happening all around us. So what does that mean? What we do as individuals and communities can influence what other people and other communities do. Climate change feels so big, but the one thing we can do, we can work together right here in our community to make change. Alone, I'm just me, but with all of you and all of your friends and all of your neighbors, anything becomes possible. So it's critical in this moment to think at the community scale, larger than our individual selves. For the widespread changes we need to take shape, we need to shift things locally. Maybe I can't go to the next big climate summit. Maybe you can't go sit outside the president's office, but something we can do, we can work for change in our community. So let's go. Let's imagine Freeport in 2040. What would it look like? What could it look like? Could it look like Ithaca, New York, which is decarbonizing all 6,000 of its buildings by 2030? Imagine that. How many buildings do we have in Freeport? Let's go. What if it looked like Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is building this housing project? All electric apartments and small houses with gardening on site, native plant walkways, bike lanes to local schools and stores. Nearly 1/3 of all units are affordable housing. Could this be Freeport? Let's go. What if Route 1 looked like this? Dedicated sidewalks, bike lanes, native plants and trees to keep things cool, and you can wave to the bees while you're riding by. Things like better zoning, building codes, electrifying everything. These may not seem like top priorities right now, but by the time people realize that we need them, it could be too late. What about community gardens downtown and at all of our public schools? What about classes teaching people how to garden, preserve food, and cook? Maybe this doesn't seem like a climate action, but it is very much, because it provides our community members with the skills, tools, and experiences that will help them be resilient in the future. What about using oyster or clam shells to stop erosion on our shore and prevent the flooding that we know is getting worse? What about working with window dressers, a Maine nonprofit that uses volunteers to build energy efficient window inserts? This is an example of how we can create changes that are accessible to everyone, not just putting solar panels on your own house, but providing community buy-in options for renters, for example. Not just handing out local seed packs, but building community gardens, teaching our children in our schools how to plant tomatoes. Not just helping people build brand new, really green houses, but making it affordable and easy for everyone to weatherize their homes and use less oil. We can do these things together. There are so many benefits of community action. Getting involved in climate action in your community can help you make new friends, get to know your neighbors better, learn more about how local government works. It might even be fun. So I'm not gonna lie, we're being honest with you here. This is hard, it's heavy stuff. The future that we had hoped for ourselves and for our children is likely not going to happen. We're facing widespread collapse of the natural systems that we depend upon, and that all of our economic and societal systems depend upon as well. But what we do have is an opportunity and a responsibility to prevent the worst. And so we're asking you to take this seriously and to sign up to do something with us here and now, to use the power that we each have. What if we all started treating this like the true emergency that it is and did something together? Because that's the only way through, together as a community. This is an incredibly important time in human history. Think how impactful it could be to take action right now. We need each other to do this work, to support each other. So let's do this. There's really no downside. Join us. Thank you. I'll send it back to Kathleen.
All right. All right. So check your body now. Does it feel a little better? Feel a little more energized and a little less like you want to go hide under the pillow? Certainly that's how I've been feeling since I've been working with all these wonderful people and talking with the people you're about to meet, all these Freeport people who you're about to meet on these 10 committees who have got a lot of ideas for what we could do and are ready to sign you up after this is over. We would like, anyway, so right now, let's see, the very first committee, the people are going to do something with my computer here. Huh? The very first committee that we have is the local food committee, which is going to be Margaret Morphet and Kathy High. Margaret has been a resident of Freeport for a really long time. She's been on a lot of town committees. She was on the, anyway, and Kathy High, we all know Kathy from Bessie's Farm. So are we ready? We're ready to, are they in? This is the hardest part. This is the hard part right here.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Here we go. Okay.
Oh no, Mason.
Okay. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Terrific. Good evening. My name is Kathy High, and the group that has captured my interest is based on food, something that we all deal with on a daily basis. Growing, transporting, cooking, eating, and disposing of leftovers all impact the climate. My personal interests converge on this committee as I'm a longtime gardener and a former master gardener. I currently co-own Bessie's Farm Goods, where our entire focus is cooking with as much local produce as possible, often grown right at our own facility. I also worked at Freeport Middle School for many years, and along with my dear friend and coworker, Dee Dee Montgomery, created vegetable gardens, a once-a-week flower and vegetable market for teachers and parents. And we even had a composting program for the cafeteria waste and a worm composting project in the furnace room, but that was another story. I won't go there tonight. Initially, I'd love to work on getting a farmer's market up and running in Freeport, one that offers locally and sustainably grown food at a time and place convenient for Freeport families. Please bring your ideas, your enthusiasm, and your sense of humor to an upcoming meeting of this committee. We can't wait to meet you. And now let me introduce you to the chair of the local food committee, Margaret Morphet. Thank you.
Not seeing you on here, Margaret. Oh, unless it's not Margaret.
What should I tell her to do? Oh, technical difficulties trying to get Margaret.
Here we go.
Yeah,
Ah, here she is. Margaret, go.
no kidding. I'm not on my screen, but maybe that doesn't matter. I'm still seeing a really cute llama. Does that matter?
No, keep going.
Keep going, okay. So hi, everybody. I'm Margaret Morphet, and I've lived in Freeport for since 1986, which feels like a fairly long time. I got involved with this group not because I'm an expert in any part of climate change, but because probably like many of you, when I first heard about climate change, I became worried about it in a kind of an unspecific, nagging way. And as time goes on, I'm worried about it in a much more visceral way. Longing to do something, thinking I really should do something, but really not knowing what. So when Kathleen suggested that we should create a community organization to work on this, I knew that I really wanted to be a part of it. So as Kathy, my co-leader, has just said, our group will be focused on food. So did you know that if food waste was a country, it would be the 4th biggest country in the world? That is to say, bigger, right after China, the United States, and India. I'm going to start my video. Hold on, let me see if that works.
She's on now.
Coming, maybe. I'm going to keep talking anyway. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So 4th biggest country, and the food production accounts for 34% of all greenhouse gases. So that gives us a lot of opportunity to think about actions we can take that could make a difference locally. We have a number of ideas to start with, starting with Kathy's hope of reviving a farmer's market here in Freeport. And as it turns out, there's a lot of interest already in that. And also they've done a lot of work. So it seems very possible that could actually happen up and running by this summer, which is really exciting. It makes us feel as if we've done a lot of work already. When we started thinking about this, we started looking around to see what other towns in Maine were doing. And one of the first ones that popped up was Millbridge, which has already started a really exciting community garden where residents have come together to create a large, centrally located garden that everyone helps plan, produce the food in, harvest, and share together. And anyone who's a member can go and get vegetables and food anytime they want to. And if they don't know how to cook it, they can have someone come and give a class in how to make it and what's nutritious. It's kind of a full service program. And what we understand is it's hugely successful. And we think maybe there's a way we could do something like that in Freeport. We've thought of other actions as well, including talking to our stores and asking them to promote local food sources and reducing food waste, helping restaurants redistribute their leftovers, getting schools involved in farming and composting just as they did when Kathy was there, and also just providing information on more climate sensitive ways to live. We've talked to enough people now to know that there are a lot of organizations around the state, some right here in our backyard, like Wolf's Neck Farm, where they're already working on climate change, and they're eager to share information and to partner with us. So it feels really hopeful to me that this growing group of concerned citizens, that they think of starting a business locally, and it can have a small impact and grow, and maybe grow and mushroom into something much bigger. To me, the most exciting part of this work is that we'll be doing it as a community. I really hope some of you, and maybe all of you, join us from this Zoom and bring your ideas and your energy and help us get it started. We'll send out an email following this meeting so that you can sign up for whatever committee you'd like to be on. Of course, we really hope you'll join us on food, but you're about to hear about the rest of them. And so you'll get a lot to choose from. So now I'd like to introduce
Lyra, you are on and start your video and talk.
Mute. Let's do the video. Okay. You see, am I on?
Yes, we can hear you and see you.
Okay. All right, great. So I'm going to bring our concerns home a little bit for a few minutes and have us examine our own consumerism through this lens. Is it driving global warming, or is it investing in a sustainable future? Are we continuing to buy fossil fuels for our homes year after year after year? Or can we stop and make a switch to invest instead in solar panels, heat pumps, deep energy conserving retrofits, and make sure that there are available funds that our neighbors who might need help can also avail themselves of, so they can do the same things? Are we going to contribute continually to the single-use plastic waste stream? Or can we find some simple solutions like this wonderful company in Portland, Go Go Refill, that sells bulk household essentials to customers who bring their own containers whenever they need refills? Are we going to hold credit cards, accounts, and mortgages with banks who invest and hold in place the fossil fuel industry? Or will we find banks that we can switch to that have divested and have an environmentally sound track record? Also, are we aware of the impact of our food and clothing choices? 10% of the global carbon footprint is from the fashion industry. Let's start shopping at some of these wonderful secondhand stores we have. Also, if America adopted the Meatless Monday movement, that's the, if you just give up a quarter pound of beef consumption a week, it would be equivalent to eliminating the emissions from 4 to 6 million cars. These are just a few examples of the choices and solutions that we'll look at with the Conscious Consumerism Committee. I hope that some of you will join us with your own ideas and creativity as we learn to use our consumer clout to combat climate change. The next person up will be Kate Olsen, who is the chair of the Equity and Social Justice Committee. But before we go to Kate, I'd just like to end my time with a clip from The Lord of the Rings as we come together to face our own Frodo moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Lyra. Hi, everyone. Again, my name's Kate. I'll be chairing the Equity Committee. I would love to have a co-chair along though. So if you're interested, get in touch, please. So we heard earlier from Anna a little bit about how climate change is inherently an issue of equity. I can't say for sure what this group will work on because I want to form an agenda together this spring with folks who are interested. But I can say that we will start with a recognition that the climate crisis is fundamentally an issue of equity. Globally and locally, those who have contributed least to the crisis will be the most vulnerable to its impacts. So the equity group will work on empowering Freeport residents to contribute to change in our community by focusing on meeting the needs of the most vulnerable within our community first. We will consider how to root community climate actions in equity and in inclusion, and we'll pay particular attention to partnering with other community organizations and individuals whose positions and needs have historically been underamplified, underrepresented, and underserved. I see us working with all of the other committees, with the town, and engaging in upcoming planning processes to make sure that the changes that we make for the climate are accessible and affordable to all. Please reach out to me directly if you'd like to learn more, or you can sign up for this group online at freeportcan.org. That's it. I'll hand it off now to Suzanne Watson.
Good evening, fellow Freeporters. My name's Suzanne Watson, and I am heading up the Buildings and Energy Efficiency Committee and Action Group, actually. I would really like to invite you all to consider joining in a specific project. And that would be the idea of what was originally envisioned with and this slide that you see in front of you right now just sort of shows the importance of residential energy use and the fact that 19% of our greenhouse gas emissions is produced by residential energy use. And so how do we address that issue? We do it by energy efficiency and weatherization of our homes. And the idea that was presented to me as a thought was kind of originated from Donna Larson's work, our former town planner, who came up with the idea of Solarize Freeport. So I've adopted this as sort of a insulate Freeport. And how do we do that is how we do it in as a town plan, as an action group. And I hope that you all will join me in how we go forward. We have towns around us here in Maine, in particular with Bar Harbor and Mount Desert Island. They're doing the same sort of idea of insulate MDI, and we can use their work to guide us in going forward with this. And you can see some of the steps that they've included and we will include. And I would just invite you to come and join us in the idea of insulate Freeport. And again, with the idea that we can make homes healthier, happier, and healthier going forward. So please consider joining Insulate Freeport. Thank you.
Next up, we've got Kim True on board. So, Kim, when you're there, jump on.
Can you hear me now? Hi. My name is Kim True, and I'm heading up the Local Transportation and Carbon Impact Committee. And if you could put the slides on, please, starting with Suzanne's last one. Suzanne, I'd appreciate that. One of Suzanne's slides noted that transportation is responsible for approximately 54% of Maine's greenhouse gases. The Transportation and Carbon Impact Committee is going to be working on what we can do as a community to reduce greenhouse gases while meeting our transportation needs. Basically, there are 3 routes to reducing greenhouse gases for transportation. One of them is to increase the efficiency of vehicle technology. 2 is to change how we travel and transport goods. And 3 is to switch to lower carbon fuels. While society needs to pursue all 3 of these routes to achieve our goals on climate, the local transportation committee will focus on the last 2, lowering Freeport's carbon emissions by changing how we travel and transport goods, and by getting more of us to switch to lower carbon fuels. Freeport can reduce our greenhouse gases by community members reducing the number of miles we drive in our fossil fuel powered vehicles. In Freeport, we're fortunate that we already have significant infrastructure in place that can help us be less dependent on private gas-powered vehicles. If we're serious about reducing greenhouse gases, we need to figure out how to increase our use of these various alternatives. Freeport will soon be able to estimate the town's on-road transportation emissions from vehicle travel. The Transportation Committee will use this data to track our efforts in reducing the number of vehicle miles traveled, giving us a means for measuring our success in advancing the committee's goals. Now, according to the US Department of Energy, approximately 60% of all one-way auto trips in the United States is for traveling 6 miles or less, with more than 25% of those trips being for 2 miles or less. Now, what I have to say is, having been involved with the Bicycle Coalition of Maine for years, is what if we used our cars less and we did more biking and walking to get to our local service providers or stores or errands that we need to do, or to get to work in school? Freeport is currently engaged in long-range planning on how to make the downtown region more sustainable, which includes making it more bicycle and pedestrian friendly. I want to give a plug, as did Mason, to the Freeport Downtown Vision Design Workshop that's being held February 3rd through the 7th, that will solicit community input about what we want in our downtown. One session is devoted to designing biking and walking improvements throughout Freeport, and that's set for Friday, February 4th. I urge you to attend. The Transportation Committee will help implement the plan that ultimately comes out of this visioning process. I invite anyone who's interested in reducing Freeport's greenhouse gases to join the, I want anybody who's interested in reducing Freeport's greenhouse gases to join the local Transportation and Carbon Impact Committee. You can do so by signing up on the email that'll be coming out as a result of your being on this webinar, and then I'll contact you. We welcome all of the ideas. There are many more things that can be done, but we need you, we need the community to be working together to achieve them. Now I want to introduce you to Bob Stevens, who along with Susanna Hancock is heading up the Solar Energy in Maine Committee. Thank you.
Okay, here I am. Can you hear me? All right, thank you, Kim. I'm going to keep this short. I think we've been talking a long time here. The bottom line is we have to solarize Freeport. And there are 2 ways to go about this: solar farms or solar rooftops. We've got to work on solar rooftops because they're things that we can address individually. What we can do is we could talk to neighborhoods and friends, educate them about the advantages of solarization, the energy that and the money that they will save, and what it will help do for the community and slowing down the planet growth. There are a number of ways we can do it. We can maybe get neighborhoods to compete on who can solarize the most. We used to do that. on floats for the parades in Freeport. So it'd be another neat thing to do now. There are a lot of other ideas. And I think what I'm going to do is stop talking, frankly, and I'm going to put a number of these ideas on the Freeport Can site so we can move on and with our program here. So we're taking you back now to Mason Morphet. And I want you to join our committee for sure. We need more ideas and we need more people. Thanks.
So Mason, you need to come on live.
I'm here.
All right, it's up to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you guys have probably heard enough from me already. I'll keep this very short. I just want to reiterate a couple of messages, one of which is, if we can have a slide here.
It's coming.
It's coming, all right. Here we go. Oh, you're close. One up. There you go. Okay, stop there. So the basic message here is, as I've indicated before, that government is where much or most of the action is, and that we need to stay in touch with it. The other thing we need to recognize is that it won't be easy, that the making of government policy and the implementation of government programs can often be messy, but are responsive to citizen input. And I had a slide that attempted to illustrate that. There you go. The well-known, you don't want to watch legislation being made any more than you want to see sausage being made. Next slide, please. Each of us as individuals can make a difference if we learn up, show up, and speak up. Collectively, I hope we'll reap the benefits of powder milk biscuits, as described by Garrison Keillor on Prairie Home Companion. They give shy people the strength to get up and do what needs to be done. Freeport needs volunteers. Next slide. With experience or interest in government to monitor evolving government initiatives, to determine how they might be employed to deal with climate change, and suggest how they might be improved and promote their implementation through public testimony or lobbying as appropriate. Next slide. I'd like to end with a little bit of encouraging local history. Back in 1989, Bridget Sullivan Stevens came home from school and told her mother, the acting chair of Freeport Can Steering Committee, that she was worried about the deterioration of the ozone layer and that she'd have to ride to school in a tunnel. This was attributable in part to the use of chlorofluorocarbons in the manufacture of styrofoam. Shortly thereafter, Bridget and Anna Brown, now a member of our steering committee, formed CAKE, Concerned About Kids' Environment. Although children at the time, they succeeded in changing town policy, which now prohibits the use of polystyrene products in the sale of prepared foods. So 33 years later, it's now our generation's turn to take climate action to protect the world for the next generation. Next.
That was a long time ago, but look what we did then, and it's time again to make Freeport a model community for these kinds of actions. I just want to say how thrilling it is to be back here working with Anna again. So I want to tell you about Third Act. Third Act is a national organization started by my hero, Bill McKibben. And Bill McKibben started this organization for people over the age of 60, for the old folks in the neighborhood, because what he really thought it was time for us, for our generation, to step up. And people are fooling with my computer again, and I'm supposed to talk while there's a hand in my face. It's so difficult. So I'd like to make Freeport Can a division, a working group for just a part of what we'll be doing with Freeport, with Third Act, is joining some of the national movements that they have, particularly around divestment and voting. Those are the two kinds of things they're going to be having national events throughout the year. And I'll be telling about that. I'd love to have you join up. Third Act, you can go online, thirdact.org, read about it. And so the next person to go is Lee Chisholm, who is going to tell us about the art and writing. There we go.
Can everybody see me and hear me, I trust? Ah, good, good. Well, art and writing. I think everybody is an artist, and I think there is an art to everything. But I don't really know yet what the Art and Stories Action Committee will be or should be. There are three things, though, that I think it could be, maybe more. One, it could be a spotlight and a communicator, clearly and colorfully making known some of the important inventive things that the other action committees are doing. Or it could be an initiator, appealingly rallying citizens of Freeport to take part in some new action or event that is not yet known or sharply in focus. Or third, it could simply be a maker of beautiful things, arresting things, that celebrate the fact that Freeport can and Freeport is pushing back against an unraveling climate. But I want to try to tell you in an odd sort of way why the whole idea of Freeport can makes me grateful to participate. Picture, let me get my own screen up here. Picture, if you will, a codfish. Now picture him with this message for his warming world. He finds friends aplenty who voice the same message, and with them he goes full of hope and enthusiasm out onto the streets. Even teams up with Luminart, 350 Maine, and the leftist marching band, together with a few middle school students, to light up his message across 3,000 square feet of building facade in Maine's biggest city. But this takes place just a few weeks before the presidential election of 2016. He has not foreseen that, nor have his human friends. For a score of months, he fights gamely on, but he is, after all, only a fish. In 2018, he dies. His body is carried on a bier from Lincoln Park through the Old Port to Portland City Hall, where he is honored with a funeral oration and the moving words of 5 powerful youth activists. But utterly oblivious, the fossil fuel industry still hums along. Not in 3 years, nor in 30, has Congress done spit on climate. It is like waiting for Godot. So here is why I'm grateful for the idea of Freeport Can. One's own town may be the perfect group in which to take climate action. It is more nimble, more personal than Washington. It has diversity. Nobody need feel that they're just preaching to the choir. And it is full of talents and life experiences and possibilities. In short, no matter what the art or stories that come out of this particular committee, by uniting around this vision of climate action now and acting together, the effects could be positively incandescent. Now, I'd like to introduce Lucy Burkett and Jennifer Melville, who will be chairing the Lands and Waters Committee, Fostering Resilience in the Face of Climate Change, our Lands and Waters. Jen and Lucy.
And we'll just
go ahead. Thank you. Thankfully, I'm Lucy. Mute that. One sec. Sorry, guys. I'm Lucy, and this is Jenny. We're here because we know that climate work is inextricably linked with how we care for and how we relate with our land in which we live. Trees, soils, streams, our own yards, our communities, lands, and waters. Alrighty, I want to see if I can just show you some slides here, just for entertainment value. Hold on one sec, though. You know what? I think it's going to be too complicated this late in the evening, so we will not bother. Sorry about that. So yeah, so Lucy and I just want to work with whoever is interested in working with us. Sorry, we just getting the screen here together to protect our woods, our soils, our streams, our stream buffers, our salt marshes, because we all know that they're essential to meeting the climate crisis. These places take up and store our carbon emissions, and if we care for them, they will still foster the plants and animals even as that we all care about and that are so important to us even as the climate changes. Sometimes people forget about the land piece and the water piece of climate, and we know how important that is. So that's why this committee is going to be focused on that. Fortunately, Freeport has a lot of really climate resilient places and carbon rich lands and waters. And we also live within this vast Appalachian forest region, so which sequesters a huge amount of our nation's carbon. So what we do here at home in Freeport does matter. It matters in Maine, it matters on the continent, it matters globally. So what we want to do is come together with anybody in our community, love that community framing that Kate gave us, to shift our attention and efforts toward nurturing our relationships with the land that we live on and consider what it means to care for our woods and waters. So together, we want to reconsider how we care for our lawns, our yards, our streams, our municipal properties, our building developments. There's a lot we can do, and that's accessible and pretty easy and we think fun to do. We'll also have a conversation about what we're doing in terms of land care and management. So we're aware, I think somebody else had this in their group, there are lots of amazing groups and organizations, people doing important work in this area. So we see this as an opportunity to connect with existing resources and organizations. We can work together to figure out, what groups need our support, what needs a little extra effort, energy, and what gaps we can fill to be most effective. So we look forward to working together and with whoever else wants to join us. Yeah, I look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you all. Well, we've done it. We've presented ourselves to you. We've introduced ourselves to you. And we hope you'll choose us. We hope you'll, if it's a coming out party, we'll hope you ask us to dance. And we hope we can have a party sometime soon. We can all meet together sometime outside and talk about what we've been doing. I've got a wonderful quote I'd like to read to you. It's by Amitav Ghosh, who's an Indian writer who writes about the environment, and he's a beautiful writer. And he says, "It is not billionaires or technology that will save us, but instead a vitalist mass movement driven by human spirit that may actually be magical enough to change hearts and minds across the world." I hope you've seen a little bit of that kind of magic tonight. And I hope you'll come and bring your own magic to us. And that we get to know your magic. So the thing that we're going to do now, we could take some questions. I want to, you're all quite wonderful to have stayed with us. Most of you have stayed and have not gone and, gone to sleep yet. So thank you for staying. But I don't think we're going to take questions tonight because it's late. I'm sure you'd all like to just say goodbye. But what we're going to do is send you all tomorrow a way to stay in contact with us, a way to sign up for those committees. The committee chairs are going to have meetings within the next 2 weeks, so we can get started right away. You don't have to wait till August to get started on some of these committees. We'd like to start right away because, as everybody has said, there's not much time left. So tomorrow, an email will go out to all of you, and that's the way we'll get to meet you. So everybody here is telling me that I should end. So let's all come wave goodbye. Come, help me do this. Help me do that. I wished I could see your faces to wave goodbye to you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you very much.